So you can use compounds that are complementary, or you can use compounds that offset each other's negativity. There's a fair few ways that you look at a stack. But technically, combining an oral with an injectable is still a stack.
Absolutely.
And the pathway that an oral takes for receptor engagement isn't the same, apart from one, isn't the same as injectables. So injectables combine with AR, whereas orals, in the most part, engage with the non-genomic and genomic receptors in muscle tissue. So not getting too technical, but basically they have two different pathways of signaling growth. So again, what you're looking at is increasing the overall effect from the drugs you're taking by working down two separate routes of stimulation when it comes to recovery and growth.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast with Dave Crosland. I'm Scott McNally, and hey, all of our programming is brought to you by you. Well, some of you, the people of Patreon, thank you guys for helping to support the programming. I've been trying to do early releases and stuff over on Patreon. We are also brought to you by Strom Sports Nutrition. You get some good health supplements from them. You can get like cycle support. You can even get canine joint support over there. Did you know that, Dave? He's got a canine joint support product, which I think that's pretty cool. You can also go over to evalbloodanalysis.com, get your lab work done by Dave if you're in the UK. Of course, truenutrition.com. We have a question that relates to them today. Use our code THINKOVER at True Nutrition, and supplementsource.ca for our Canadians. Dave, we got a bunch of stuff going on today, but today we're going to talk about stacking compounds. What's your stack, bro?
My car failed its MOT.
What?
My car failed its MOT.
Your car did? It failed its... Yeah. What does that have to do with stacking? What does that have to do with your stack?
Nothing. I'm just sad about it, all right? It's going to cost me a lot of money.
It's a pretty new car, isn't it?
4.5, 5 years old.
Yeah, so that should be still pretty good. What's that? MOT is, I imagine that's like some sort of emissions test you people do over there?
Emissions and safety check, yeah. Right, anyway, moving on. Stacking compounds. So... reasons for stacking please send any money for Dave's car MOT fund to Mr. D. Crosland. Stacking compounds. Originally, there's a couple of reasons why stacking has been sort of theorized as why people started doing it. One is to limit the exposure to the negatives of one particular drug by spreading that across several compounds that have different negatives.
Yeah.
So a very simple argument would be you have a compound that aromatizes and creates estrogen. So you put that with a compound that doesn't create estrogen, so that the negatives from that compound are slightly different, allowing you to create a larger total dose of anabolics without actually increasing, in this case, estrogen effects. So that was one of the reasons. From that, what's become more popular, particularly of late, but has been around for a very, very long time, is selecting compounds that not quite complement, but almost work in some form of cooperative way with the base compound. And a prime example of this is, again, around estrogen. So you take testosterone, which converts to estrogen. Then you take Masteron, which has an anti-estrogenic effect, which in most people is going to be SERM-like. So it blocks receptors for the less educated. But in some people, it can actually lower estrogen levels. Or you stack it with Primo, which is anti-estrogenic as well, and that will lower estrogen levels. So your second drug not only gives you more androgens, but it also controls the estrogen from the first drug. So there's another reason where stacking can be very useful. Yeah. And certain drugs have limitations. So for argument's sake, there's been a lot of debate over this for years, and I'm not going to get into the DECA-only cycle debate, but DECA doesn't convert to DHT. DHT is a primary hormone that we use as males. We use testosterone, we use DHT, and we use estrogen. So DECA converts to DHN. DHN isn't as strong as DHT. So generally speaking, DECA is, in my opinion, pretty much the best single bulking compound there is. It's anti-inflammatory, it's supportive of joints. It has some negative impact on brain function and heart, and definitely, as someone, actually, I need to go on to something. Remind me, ADHD.
Okay.
But what it doesn't do is produce any DHT. So it's been commonplace for a long time to run a test compound with DECA so you get some baseline DHT production.
Yeah.
And that's, again, it's a stack, but it's more of a stack out of necessity because you need the DHT to help with normal function. And though there are people that have run nandrolone-only cycles and done okay on them, the number that struggle with it is far greater than the number that don't, from my experience anyway. I know there's people that will disagree with this, and I don't want to go down that road.
Oh, yeah.
This is not a attack on DECA-only cycles. If you tolerate it, fine, crack on.
Crack on, right, Dave?
If you don't, throw DHT in there as well.
That was British. You said the same thing, and I knew you were going to say crack on. Crack on, Dave. Crack on, mate.
So there are where you can see anabolics, injectable anabolics stacked. So you can use compounds that are complementary, or you can use compounds that offset each other's negativity. There's a fair few ways that you look at a stack. But technically, combining an oral with an injectable is still a stack.
Absolutely.
And the pathway that an oral takes for receptor engagement isn't the same, apart from one, isn't the same as injectables. So injectables combine with AR, whereas orals, on the most part, engage with the non-genomic and genomic receptors in muscle tissue. So not getting too technical, but basically they have two different pathways of signaling growth. So again, what you're looking at is increasing the overall effect from the drugs you're taking by working down two separate routes of stimulation when it comes to recovery and growth. And again, that's stacking orals with injectables. So, yeah, I mean, stacking takes all sorts of shapes and forms. The intricacies of what compounds to use is very much around the compound's individual properties, and that's where people need compound knowledge. And I think that's where a lot of people get unstuck, because they don't actually understand. And the thing is, we are not, I mean, I don't mean, I mean, as a community, as a society, as people, we are still learning things about these compounds and their intricacies. You know, it's only fairly recently there's been studies around Masteron and what its metabolites do in the way of its anti-estrogen properties, and that's when it was discovered that they mainly have a SERM-like action. It's not yet scientifically understood why Masteron will lower estrogen levels in some people and not in others. We know Primo has an AI effect on estrogen. So, you know, but it's when you learn what the compounds do, both effects that we desire, and I'm using these words very, very deliberately, and effects that we don't desire, then you can start to learn how certain compounds will slot in with other compounds effectively.
That's very well said. That's very well said, Dave.
We talk about estrogen from tests as a negative impact, but actually it's not. It's just something that it does.
And the more you take, kind of like you're going to get more,
yeah.
You know,
and
more estrogen as well.
There are people that will welcome higher estrogen levels for specific reasons to them, you know. So what we class as side effects, they're not. They're just effects that those compounds have. They're not good or bad, but some of them can have unwanted impacts on us, and they need to be managed. You know, DECA and Tren can raise prolactin. That can have a very negative impact on us, so it needs to be managed. So, but once you understand the effects of the compounds, be them positive or negative to you, you then learn how to manage them, but then you also learn is how they'll complement or support other compound use depending on what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with all of this. I was thinking as you're talking about like using a DHT compound, it used to be, it's funny, I wonder how many people remember Proviron. Proviron was so popular for 15 years. I never really got it. My thought had always been like, hey, why use Proviron if you're not really getting an additional anabolic effect? for the cost, because cost, at least here in the US, it's not cheap. And at that price, I'm like, well, why don't I add in something like Masteron, because that's going to at least give me the added bonus of helping me grow muscle too. Even if it's in the diet phase, I'd prefer to have that than Proviron.
Well, the thing is with Proviron, so Proviron has it's an anti-estrogen. It's actually an anabolic steroid.
Yeah, kind of.
It is. No, technically, it is an anabolic steroid.
I know,
it's recognized an anabolic steroid, but it is metabolized in muscle tissue, so it has no anabolic effect in muscle tissue. It's anti-estrogenic, and it's probably on the low end of anti-estrogens. So as a result, it's useful as a very mild anti-estrogen if you're only wanting to just sort of knock it down a touch. You don't want to hit it too hard. And it lowers SHBG. So a lot of people think, right, Proviron needs to be in every cycle. It lowers SHBG.
They used to.
It means I'm going to have more free tests.
They used to. Now they use Masteron instead, or Primo.
But the thing is, when you look at bloods anyway, so SHBG in someone on a test or just a general test cycle is most likely to have SHBG in the very low teens, potentially single digits. Right, you take Proviron on top of that, and you might lower that SHBG by 3-4 points. It's like, for what you're spending, it's a very expensive way for not actually getting a great deal of benefit. Now, where Proviron does come in is when you're on TRT. It can be very useful there because increasing free tests on TRT will be much more significant on how you feel than it will in a cycle environment when SHBG is already slammed to the floor. So Proviron, anti-estrogen, useful little drug if you're only wanting something a little bit mild. Great support with TRT, particularly if you're struggling a little bit with libido and that sort of thing on TRT. But in a cycle, I struggle to justify the spend personally, I must admit.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. But that used to be the thing. I will say this, that in a contest prep setting, what I had often seen is 50 milligrams Proviron through as long as you can afford to do that. And then if possible, crank that to like 100 every day toward the end. And there is definitely a drying, hardening effect that I recall seeing when people would do that. Though, like I said, it wasn't something I've suggested people to use. The only time I've ever really used it with people is because they had a bunch of it and they wanted to use it. It's like, okay, then we'll work it in,
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, when you look at the spend on Proviron to run at 100 milligrams a day, there are far better drugs that will be a lot cheaper for the same impact.
I would agree.
If I wanted a muscle hardening drying effect from an oral for a show, I'd go on Winstrol. I wouldn't be paying 4 tablets of Proviron to
they'll take that too. They'll take that too. There's that going on as well. That's like in the background kind of thing. More of a hardening agent, not really looked at, I think, by competitors as being like one of my anabolics. Like, it kind of doesn't count. You know what I mean? Like, in their heads.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard people say, "Oh, you need to take Proviron on a DECA cycle because it prevents DECA-dick." No, it doesn't.
I could see that kind of help in the same way I could see getting some sort of a DHT compound in there.
I would be much more prone to go with a DHT compound if you're going to have problems in that department. But I'd also be much more prone to manage estrogen and prolactin in the first place.
Right.
So then if those two are managed, the only issue you can have left is DHN. And if that's the case, you need to supplant it with a DHT. And if I'm going to add a DHT, let's add one with at least an anabolic profile.
Yeah. So this question all stemmed from one of our listeners. And the question they asked is, why not just use more tests? Why mix all these different compounds and everything? And I'm going to share with you my personal experience being like 4 cycles in. And I've shared this story before, but I think so. First cycle is like 15 deep only.
Whoa. Okay? Have you just stated that you've only done 4 cycles then?
At the time of the story, yes. 4 cycles, and I think 15 D-ball only was the first one. And then it was, I believe, 400 test from the British Dragon line of test sip, along with, I think I did have Proviron for that, and I was using D-ball, the pink ties. And from there, it was test in D-ball, or test DECA in D-ball. Now, after that one, I was coming off doing PCT recovering. I struggled so terribly with recovering from DECA. And I said, man, this is a complete waste of time. Why don't I just use more tests? The same thing that our listener had asked us. So then I thought to myself, okay, so if I think it was 500 tests and 400 DECA, there's 900 milligrams. Why don't I just get these Omnidron amps for a good deal? And I'll run one of those every other day. We're doing about 1,000 milligrams per week, close to the same amount. And guess what, man? I got the absolute worst back knee that you could possibly have in your life from that cycle. It was because I just assumed, why not do more tests? And I didn't have it well managed. And I think that there was something specific with the Omnidrons. There was something just that irritated my skin. I kind of wonder whether they were 100% legit looking back at it. That oil wasn't great. But that said, though, that was my experience of of going super high with the test, not really understanding how to manage it at the time. It was equally as bad as my recovery was from that previous cycle. So, I never had that kind of side effect to test before. But my point is because I was able to get the total milligrams up by using multiple compounds in the past versus more of one equaled more sides.
Potentially. I mean, it'd be interesting. I know you wouldn't have this data, but it'd be interesting to know what your estrogen level was on a DECA D-ball test cycle against what your estrogen was on a test-only cycle. Because I would suspect that your acne was driven by the DHT conversion rather than the estrogen, personally.
In the Omnidron cycle? It's possible, man. Yeah, it's possible, because I can't remember. It's been so long now. But
because what the people need to recognize as well, the DHT conversion from testosterone is not the same as the DHT we take. They have some very similar properties, but our testosterone, our anabolic DHTs are not bioidentical to natural DHT. There are subtle differences, so just so people know. Yeah, I mean, I've run 3 gram a test, but then I've never had sensitivity to estrogen, so those side of things were never really a problem for me, and I loved it, if I'm honest. It was next level shit. But probably one of my genetic advantages is a relatively good toleration to the non-wanted effects of steroids when in use. I'm not talking about long-term health impacts, but actual when in use. So
yeah, right.
It's only when I properly hammered the tren did I start having any real skin problems, and then I got rosaceous acne, and it was quite bad.
Yeah.
But prior to that, very high doses. Yeah, I'd get a bit of water retention, but that was it. That was as far as my problems went. And that, in part, was both a blessing and a curse, because obviously when you feel good, you're not getting sides, you don't start to consider that it's doing long-term issues inside you.
Yeah.
But shit is what it is. Yeah. But yeah, so I'm unfortunately a bad person to talk to about sides, because I never really got in it.
Yeah, I ended up getting better at managing it after that down the road. That said, interesting point here from Brandon in the live stream. Guys, by the way, if you're new to our content, let me encourage you to subscribe. Like 30-40% of the people who watch the shows, they aren't subscribed. And you know what? If we are providing any value today, then that's one thing that you can do that's absolutely free that will help us out. So thank you for that. And also like button, all that stuff, guys, liking and sharing. It is huge. It is huge to help the show. So if we're doing something for you, you can show your appreciation by hitting that. So interesting here. He says Brandon says that he felt like the sides or your tolerance to test gets better over time. That
I think there's an element of that. Yeah,
I do
don't
too.
know if I don't know if it's an age-related thing or it's an exposure-related thing. I noticed on blood work with the older gentlemen, they seem to get away with running much higher TRT doses with much less negatives than younger people do. And in those scenarios, I don't think it's particularly that they've had any greater exposure to anabolics over the period of time, because a lot of these old school guys were just always low dose users. But yeah, I do think there's something in that, and I can't give you argument as why. I don't know if it's that the effects change or if it's just our personal sensitivity to those effects change. In that, I don't know if it's a case of when you ran tests previously, like in your early days, that the estrogen from 400 tests was higher than estrogen from 400 tests is now, or just that your brain's ability to cope with that increased estrogen has just got better.
Yeah, I wonder about that too. And even sides like the negative stuff from Tren. You know, early on, first Tren cycles, oh my God, I got next to no sleep, felt like a zombie every day because I'm tired. Yet I still made incredible progress and I was lifting heavier than ever. But fast forward down the years, I could handle way more Tren and not have nearly, like, I could just function as normal. There was no like crazy roller coaster ride with it.
I mean, the other thing that's difficult to factor in is drug quality as well. I don't know if that's changed over decades. I mean, obviously, when I was first introduced to anabolics, everything was pharma. You know, everything was coming out of pharma grade. Nothing was UGL, and I've lived through the emergence of UGL. And I don't know if there's a definite change in quality of drugs over time or not.
I think it's more of an exposure thing. Obviously, we can't say for sure all gear is good, or, you know, just like we can't say it's all bad either, though. I think that as of right now, we are in a renaissance of UGL, that there is testing available. People are sending that stuff out. Even growth is getting tested regularly. There's a lot of accountability more than ever, and availability. You know, I was talking to somebody recently through a pro. We were talking about Halo. It was an off the air conversation, and he was like, "Yeah, when I was competing, it was really hard to get Halo." But I'm like, now, really, because of the availability of raws, it's everywhere. You know,
was that a recent conversation?
Yes, it was.
No, was it? I know who it is.
No, you don't.
I do.
Okay, we'll talk about it later.
I think it is anyway. I think I know who that is.
Okay, yeah, maybe. Surprise, surprise! A retired pro once took Halo, guys.
Oh no, just not at all, not in the slightest. But I think I know what that was.
All right. Anyway, let's see what we've got for listener questions, because, like I said, man, we got a lot of them. And guys, if you want to take part in the next show, then definitely comment below, because just as all of your likes and subscribes, all that stuff, as much as that helps us, commenting is huge. So we appreciate everybody who commented with questions or comments. Hey, Scott, the following question is for both of you. How many protein shakes are bodybuilders having in a day, and how many did you and Dave used to have? For example, when I'm having 3 shakes, I literally become a biological weapon, farting nonstop. I'm generally having whey protein from top brands, so quality is expected to be good. Nowadays, I only have 1 shake, and it seems to digest well. I asked him some further stuff. I asked what the brand is that he was using, and he's always used Optimum Nutrition Gold Standard, which is a concentrate. So concentrate generally is not as good of a digesting protein, and if you're getting gas, your body's not processing that well. So I suggested, if he's in the US, to go to truenutrition.com, and they have several different ISOs available, and even like the cold filtered ISO, that's what I used through all my contest prep. And if you get a good isolate, if you want to use a national brand, go with like Dymatize ISO 100, but I'm suggesting True Nutrition, and that's what I used. So I would go that route, and if that doesn't work, than like a beef protein or something that tastes gross like that.
Right. First of all, that was a seamless plug. I don't think anyone noticed that you plugged that hard then.
Well, here's the thing, man. I'm going to tell you what, Dave, is that thank you, first of all. But True Nutrition never asked me to advertise for them. I used them all through my contest prep. So I literally, when I felt like we had enough followers, they were the first person that I was like, hey, would you guys please work with us? So there's that.
No, I'm not. I'm genuinely, I'm just tech based, but I just found it funny.
Thank you. So I mean, right. But
I never actually used much in the way of protein shakes at all. Like him, I never digested it particularly well. It always made me feel bloated and uncomfortable. I did the obligatory shake post-workout like you're supposed to do. And never really got on with it that well. I did it on my big bulks for the simple reason as it was an opportunity to get a shitload of calories in.
Yeah.
And that was the only liquid sort of intake I had where I'd take a mass gainer post-workout. But other than that, I've never been a big fan. I've always liked food over a shake any day. But, they are convenient if you tolerate them, which most people do, to be fair. Most people get on with them fairly well. And there's so many variants now. It's not so much an issue. I found they can be really useful, but for me personally, it was never something I particularly got on with or wanted to do.
I've seen it go all sorts of ways. For me, I would say 2 shakes a day would probably be pretty average. I've seen like Dave Palumbo, he used to use like when the meal replacements were first coming out back in like the early 2000s.
I used to use Meta-X quite a lot.
Yeah, that's what he used. And he would do 3 solid meals and 3 meal replacement shakes. That was his diet. And Dave obviously, man, he had some quality genetics to be able to get up to 300 pounds just eating like that,
There's a gym local to me, Maloney's, and they were famous for their protein shake. You've got to have a Maloney's protein shake.
Yeah.
And the secret ingredient of these protein shakes was hidden for years.
No.
And then eventually it came out. It was milk powder with Nesquik milkshake flavoring.
Oh, okay.
So what you were getting was a shake made with milk and milk powder added to it.
Ooh.
And then a flavoring from Nesquik. I mean, we all knew it was the flavoring, but what we didn't know was what the protein powder was. The protein powder was actually milk powder.
Oh, wow.
So you got a super milky shake.
They make really good shakes at the gyms now with like those slushy machines, Like they turn out so good. All right, what else do we have here? Do you guys know the drugs that are generally used by professional athletes and what is the dosages that they take? It is insane to see the jacked professional athletes claiming that they are natural and their blood results come up just fine. Oh, yeah.
And so,
and Big Macs, too.
Go on.
Dave Palumbo ate a lot of Big Macs, too. Good for him. That worked good for him.
I know anabolics are used in professional sport. Let's not be naive and say that they're not. But I know a lot of, pro athletes that don't as well. So I think it's a really mixed bag there. What they're using, I haven't got a frigging Scooby. I'm sorry, I genuinely do not know. I mean, obviously, I've spoke tons about the Olympics with the East Germans and T-ball and all that crap because it's just one of the big data pools of the effectiveness of an anabolic that's been recorded against sports performers.
Yeah.
But to be honest, beyond that, I really don't know. I couldn't tell you. I mean, the only man I know that's very into this field is Broderick, and right. I haven't asked him because we didn't do the podcast this week, so I'll ask him next week.
You're going to ask him to come on the show, is what you mean? You're going to talk to him?
Yeah. But so that's really his forte. He's very up on what compounds are used and masking agents and everything else that goes with it. But to be honest, don't know. It's not something I've really paid a lot of attention to, so it's not something I've ever bothered to look at.
I can tell you one thing they're not using: nandrolone.
Yeah, Deco.
And why? Why aren't they using nandrolone, Dave?
Because it's highly detectable for extended periods of time.
For like a year or two. Like you could test positive a year later. So 18 months.
18 months. Up to 18 months, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. So that's a kiss of death. What we can tell you is that they're going to want to take things that are in and out fast, that, will have short detectability. I would even think, man, like testosterone is a great way to go, as long as you can get your test to epi test, because there's no testing, from what I understand, for actual testosterone. So that's 6 months, 4 months down the road, you could be off of that and keep your test to epi test in range, and that's gonna fly. That's gonna be okay.
Well, I mean, they've shown that any exposure to anabolics can have a long-term effect, and what the Russians were very big on doing was full-blown cycles in the off-season.
Yeah.
And then no drug use at all for the 3-4 months leading up to the Olympics. But those individuals still hadn't improved in performance above what they would have done on a natural baseline. So, yep.
And that's what they're going for.
Yeah, so there's, some of the anabolic use is it's not that it's masked at all or anything like that. It's just that it's done far enough away from competition that it's not detectable when they go to compete. Yeah, the positives, as in the performance increases, aren't as great as they would be if they were on cycle coming into a comp, but they're still greater than what they would have been without. And at that level, you're talking milliseconds in race times, you're talking inches in throw distances.
Right.
Make the world a difference in your placing. So, yeah.
I think that's the big factor there. And I know some of the stuff Victor Conte did revolved around, say, a track runner that would use Winstrol, leading up, right? But then they come off of it, and then they're even faster because then, the weight comes down. Now, granted, Winstrol's not a compound that's gonna put on a lot of weight, but you are going to be able to maintain, be heavier. So they're heavier in this earlier phase, from what he was saying, and they're using the Winstrol, and it's creating more power, and they improve. But then they get it out of their system, and they bring them down even tighter and lower, and they move even faster. So there was a 3 steps forward, 2 steps back effect as far as adding that Winstrol in. And just like you're saying, if you're at that highly tuned level of performance, that little tiny boost is going to be huge.
Well, that's the other thing as well. Yeah. I mean, when you're at that level of performance where every single nuance of what you do is accounted for, the mildest of anabolic interactions is going to yield results.
Yeah.
Don't judge it on that you take 500 mega test for what you regard as a low cycle to put 4 or 5 pound on in a cycle. You're not living and breathing what you do every minute of the day like these guys are.
Yeah.
Every second of every day is dedicated to improving their performance. In those set of scenarios, with genetics on your side as well, the mildest of anabolic increases can have very large net results.
Yeah. All right. Here's another one. So it sounds like this is a cycle critique. He says, great video. Can I ask a question, please? I'm running a Test E, NPP, and MAST cycle and having 0.7 ml NPP. So I'm guessing 70 milligrams NPP, 0.5 test. So whatever his test is dosed at, come on, buddy. And 0.5 MAST every 3 days. Yes?
Right, people, drugs in milligrams, not milliliters. That's a measurement of volume of oil. It's not a measurement of drug compound. Get your shit sorted or go back to the classroom, stand facing the wall. He
says, okay, so he's doing all of this. It sounds like a low dose NPP test in MAST cycle. He's taking, every 3 days. I was going to up the dose after 6 weeks, and I'm going to do a 20-week course. Any advice?
So he's up in the dose once
after 6 weeks.
Every 6 weeks, or just a single dose?
He just says after 6 weeks. So I'm going to guess just the once. I don't know. Or does he mean every 6 weeks?
I don't know.
I guarantee you this, man. If he's doing a 20-week cycle and he opens it up and then doubles it 6 weeks later, he's going to probably want to do more. You know what I'm saying? Like he's going to want to, I'm sure.
I think the cycle's too long personally.
Yeah.
I think not even from a drug exposure point of view, just from a consistency and commitment point of view, most people start to lose focus when you start going beyond 12, 14 weeks. And you end up just taking the drugs for the sake of fucking taking them because you're not really pushing every inch of what you're doing. So I would run a shorter cycle. That would be my main thing to say to start with.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right, man. Get it, keep that focus, maybe 12 weeks, something like that.
I know it's old school and I know it's nothing new, but I am still a big fan of 8 to 12. Yeah. The only time I push to 16 is as an extension because everything is really going well and sweet.
Yeah.
And we've all got to that 12th week and it's like, everything's ironed out, training's going well, you're getting strong every week still. Those scenarios, yeah, I'd consider extending. But for most people, when they start getting around 10, 11 weeks, you start to see a fatigue come into everything. They're just not quite as on point with the diet. They're just not quite as pushing hard with the training. Or they're missing the odd jab here and there because they're forgetting or they're busy. And by then their focus is just gone. There's just no point continuing the drugs.
Yeah. Now, I will say with focused people, I've gone to 20, depending on the compounds, and sometimes we change them. And generally, there's going to be labs through that, so we can see, like, all right, where's your hematocrit at, halfway through this thing? Do we want to keep going past, this 12-week window? But
I've done it with multiple comp people, be it bodybuilding, strongman, or powerlifting, where they've got a line of comps tight, and we've just got no choice because there just isn't the window to come off.
Yeah,
with another comp around the corner. But I'm not a fan of running 20 weeks. If I can avoid it, I will do.
All right. How about this one? Anavar and Winnie. I
thought you had a load of non-drug questions this week, and all you've done is drug questions.
Yeah, that question about protein powder wasn't about gear.
One.
There's a lot for us, Dave. There's a lot for us. I think I do have some more though. But I'm just taking them. I'm taking them in the direction we're going, and then we have Uncle Dave's advice. Still, we got that. We got more. We got a lot more, guys. But this one happens to be about gear. Anavar and Winstrol. If you run these two in a single cycle, is there any way to optimize this stack? He was thinking Anavar weeks 5 through 10, and then Winnie weeks 10 through 15. Any advice to overlapping them for a week or for a few weeks?
Oral only cycle.
I'm guessing that no, because it's week 5 through 10. So he's probably on a at least test, right? So it's weeks 1. So he's probably already on something. It's going to be, my guess, a 15-week cycle. And he's saying weeks 5 through 10, adding in the VAR, and then 10 through 15, the Winnie. I don't like it, personally.
If it's oral only, then definitely not a 15-week cycle because you'll have no frigging estrogen and you'll just be wasting your time. If it's to complement an injectable cycle, I don't have an issue with it, but I don't see any particular justification for why.
Yeah, and he didn't mention doses, so he's talking about running orals for 10 weeks. Yeah, 10 weeks.
Yeah, it's a bit on the longer side, but again, it would very much depend on dosing. I don't see an issue with overlapping. You could take them together. I wouldn't take them for 10 weeks together, but you could definitely take them together. And also, it depends on what are you trying to achieve. If this is a cut and we're changing to Winstrol for the back end just for that last effect, fine. Yeah, I can see a reasoning for that. But I don't understand why we're not. What's the rest of the cycle? Because that plays a significant role in what you're going to do and what's your intended dosing. But there's no interaction or particular negative impact from putting them together apart from the sum of their parts. You know, you're not putting 2 and 2 and getting 6 out of it. You're 2 and 2 and getting 4 out of it in the way they're going to impact you. So it's just down to total exposure and duration on, depending on what your baseline is going to be drug wise.
I would probably personally pick one or the other. If I were to do both, then I would reduce the dose by 50% of each, combine the two, and maybe 25 of each. And say we're doing a contest prep, and then maybe the last 6 weeks, depending on what else is going on. Like if he's got trend in there, maybe just the last 4 weeks. And then I'd just tell him, like, dude, just save the Anavar for another time. That's what we'd end up doing.
Yeah, it all depends on what he wants to do with it as well, which is not in that. So he might get back and let us know.
All right. How's another gear question, Dave? He says, hello, lads. Means he's from your neck of the woods because he used the word lads. I have a question. Says, I'm natty, and I've never taken any PEDs, but lately I've been struggling with basically all the symptoms of low testosterone, but I'm only 22, and I have also gotten some acne on my back. You guys know what would be the cause of this and what would help this issue? Thanks and advice. By the way, I absolutely love the show and watch it as soon as it comes out. Keep up the great content, and please get Dave on It's Just Bodybuilding more. They liked you there, Dave. That show did really good too.
Of course it did. I was on it.
That did not sound egotistical at all.
I'm allowed moments. Leave me alone.
That's a good show. It's a good show.
First of all, blood test. Though it could well be low hormones, and there can be 1,000,001 things that have caused it, from stress to alcohol to genetics to something more sinister. There can be 1,000,001 things. So first thing is test and see where levels are. But it isn't also necessarily going to be hormones. There can be other factors that play into this as well, particularly stress factors. Things like thyroid can make you feel just as dog crap rough. Even stuff like anemia. So I would get your bloods done, because otherwise it's guesswork.
Yeah.
Once you know where you are, depending on your level would depend on whether you could pursue a natural route of using something like OTC test boosters, which I have seen do surprisingly well in people, much better than I ever expected they would have done.
Yeah.
I've seen people go 31, 32, 33 mmol on test boosters.
What kind of test boosters are we talking?
So stuff like Tribulus, DAA, Maca, Tonkat, Turkesterone. Those are the main sort of ones that we see having significant impact on people. So they're an option depending on where you are. What I tend to see is once we go subclinical, the test boosters aren't going to do anything. And if they do, they're not going to bring it up significant enough to have a real life impact. Okay. So then you're starting to look at a TRT base. But when you're sort of 11s, 12s, low teens, yeah, I've found they can be quite impressive. Poor sleep, high stress, high alcohol, shit diet are all going to impact your hormone production. So, and even super low fat diets are going to impact your hormone production. That's more significant in women, but it does affect men as well.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of things that can play around with what's going on. But until you actually have a look and know what the problem is, it's a bit, too pie in the sky to really be able to pull on anything and say, well, look, this is what you need to do, because it can be so many factors.
Yeah. I was going to mention the diet. If his diet is garbage, I mean, you would definitely want to, especially at 22, because here's the thing. There's an alluring sound to like, hey, why don't I get on TRT? Every time you turn around now, everybody's talking about like, oh, you got to optimize your test. I feel amazing and all of this. But like at 22, man, do you really want to commit to having to inject a medication for the rest of your entire freaking life? What can we do naturally?
Right, I'm going to say something now.
What's Dave going to say?
No. I come across people on a weekly basis where I have to tell them that their test is low or that they're TRT dependent. And that's fine. and a lot of people even welcome it because it gives them an excuse to stay on test year round.
Yeah.
And then 5 years later, 4 years later, they're then saying, I want to have kids. And I can't. Well, you possibly can, but it might be a lot of hard work.
Right.
Or the other big common thing is, I'm using 120 mg a week. Test levels are in the low 20s. I feel really good, but I'm still a bit down now and again. I'm still not quite super. So I'm going to push the dose up. And they push the dose up. They go to 1 ml a week. I feel great. Then 6 months later, I feel a bit crappy again. I'm going to push the dose up again. And before you know it, these guys are running 300 mg a week as a TRT level, but they're constantly feeling crap. What you've got to remember is testosterone replacement therapy is a medicational route to, I think I just made that word up, by the way.
Medicational route?
Yeah, I think medicational is not a real word. But
medicational route. But it makes sense. Sure I get it.
It sounds like it could be. Yeah,
it's a lot of syllables. It sounds very smart.
It does sound smart. I'm trying better. But the point is that it's not supposed to make you feel like friggin' Superman. But it is supposed to get rid of the shitty feeling you get from low test. But you're still going to have shitty days. You're still going to have days where you feel like crap. Because life makes you feel like that at times. You can't just drug life to the point where you feel happy all the time. Well, you could, but it's going to be a bit fucked up if you do. And when you start to fuck about with these higher doses, you end up in the shitty position where you still
see how many
feel
more
like
times
crap.
You can say bad words, Dave. You just said the
Okay.
F word, the S word, a lot of words.
You eventually end up in a situation where you don't feel very good. The benefits of taking testosterone have gone. You're now managing low HDL, thick blood, high estrogen.
Yep.
And you're faced with the prospect that what you actually need to do is come down in dose. And mentally, that is very, very challenging to do. Because you associate everything with the higher levels of test. Oh, it is real. All right, okay.
Medicational. Of or relating to medication. There you go.
So, behave yourself. Keep it proper. It's much better for you in the long run. And I haven't sworn for the last 30 seconds.
You did really good for that last 30 seconds. That was really British, too. You said, behave yourself, be proper. It was very British. Oh, okay. He says, Scott, I'm working my way through old episodes with Scott Stevenson regarding Metformin, as my coach has added it in to my stack pre-bed. From what I'm hearing, it may not be the best choice. I'm currently well into my off season at the moment. Could you and Dave share any knowledge on Metformin, please?
I personally don't like it, and I would go berberine over Metformin every time, unless I have no choices.
Brandon liked that last section. He said, well, we just knocked out Uncle Dave's advice here.
No, I've got an Uncle Dave's advice. I've written it down as well.
Oh, good man. Good man. So, you prefer berberine. I think berberine is a great compound too. What he might be referring to is that Scott was talking about how Metformin may actually get in the way of gains, and he explained how that works. I've seen it firsthand. If somebody is in, what I told this gentleman is that if you're an ectomorph and you have a hard time like putting on fat, like you're eating a ton of food, you're still in decent shape, and then you're using Metformin on top of it, I've seen it interfere with people. I worked with a guy who was working with a big name coach. He had him on a ton of carbs. Like we're talking a boatload of carbs. Plus he was hitting Metformin really heavy all through his off season. And then the guy came to work with me for a contest prep, and he really wasn't any bigger than he had been before all of this. And I've seen it a few times after that, and I started seeing, I feel like Metformin can get in the way of your gains if you're already like a guy who's a hard gainer. If you're a guy though who is going to get fat easily, and it were to then allow you to get more carbs in there might be a balance in there. Kind of like the same as like, you know, a little bit of cardio to offset fat gain while in a bulk can be a good thing. There's a balance between all of that. I think metformin could be beneficial, but I'm with you. I'd prefer to try berberine at least first.
I think insulin sensitivity can be overdone. And if you've got someone that's super sensitive and super responsive, you're going to struggle then to put weight on them.
Yeah.
You are going to fight. So yes, I agree. I've had clients where I've improved their insulin sensitivity to a point where we just cannot keep enough food in them.
Yeah.
And so we've literally had to look at dumbing it down to try and help them be more responsive for gaining weight.
All right, question for the next show. Could you guys please talk about Cardarine for fat loss? Is it safe to take for females? He wants to use it with his wife. Currently, she's 18% body fat. Cheers, lads.
Cardarine for fat loss.
GW 5015166.
Wouldn't be my choice. Wouldn't be my choice.
Yeah. Why?
I don't like the compound. I know it's good for vascular ability, and I know it's good for lipid profiles, but I just don't like the lack of research on it and the fact that all research has been abandoned on it. And it's just, I get the cancer argument that, yeah, but it was really high doses comparative to what people use and everything else. And I agree, it was. And no, they're not relatable. You know, the doses were way too high. But the problem is that we've now not got any long-term usage study. We've now got not any more development on Cardarine as an thing. Lost a word, sorry. As a compound. So as a result, we just don't know. And that's enough for me to be very reluctant to get involved with it.
Yeah. It works. It works really good, but cost to benefit, you got to weigh that out. There are a lot of people who like just they blindly will say like, no, yeah, that research was bad. So and that automatically makes them feel like, well, so that means it's safe. Because that study was not a good study. I feel like, well, it doesn't really mean anything. Kind of like we had a guy who said, good Lord.
Let's correct that, because it wasn't one study. It was every single study and every research development company that was dealing with Cardarine stopped research on it.
Yeah, and I thought it was based off of the rat study with the extremely high doses.
There was, but there was other studies as well that came up with similar results. But again, it was all with very high doses. None of it was with what dosing related to people. And that's the big thing that everybody hides behind, which is fine. Do what you want. But I just think at the end of the day, apart from its impact on lipids, which I've not seen reproduced with anything else, the fat loss capabilities, there's plenty of other compounds you can use that are going to replicate that.
Yeah, it did dramatically improve my lipids, my HDL. It also increased my the liver toxicity. My liver numbers went up when I used it. So there's that. To me, I will use the same kind of thought process as with cholesterol. You know, we had a guy comment in the last episode. He was like, "Good Lord, cholesterol has never been shown to have any relationship at all to having heart issues," or something like that. And you know, I think there is some stuff with high LDL. I think it's more like the low HDL hasn't been tied to it, but I don't want to be, and we talked about this a little bit ago, I don't want to be the guy to find out, you know? So I'm going to still try to like respect the natural balance of things, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I ended up with a myocardial infarction, which is a blood clot blockage, should I say, from plaque. So an arterial blockage from plaque, which is what my heart attack was. And I've never had high LDL, but I have had very low HDL. Well, whether that's what's caused it or not, I don't know for certain. What I know is I had a plaque build up that blocked my artery. I would rather be wrong and on the side of caution than not, risk it all and it turned out that there's a problem because I'm responsible for the people that I work with, and I don't want to do anything that's going to potentially cause some problems later on in life beyond what we have to in what we do.
Yeah.
And like I say, if people are taking HDL supporting supplements unnecessarily, they've wasted a bit of money, but that's the end of it.
Yeah. Here's one from Patreon from Luke. He says, I was doing flat bench in October of 2023, and I felt something in my shoulder rip. It sounded like paper tearing. Turns out it was 100% rupture of the supraspinatus in my left shoulder. I had surgery on 12/27/23 and was just released to begin to push again. But I'm starting over, or at least it feels like it. I started 4 units of generic growth about 2 weeks after surgery. Been on that daily ever since. So my question is, can adding in a low dose of VAR assist in healing along with the growth? I'm only on 160 TRT per week. He's 37. I think we might have answered this one before, but I can't remember for sure.
I would have thought the healing's pretty much done. It's now the rehab of strengthening the repaired tendon, which is going to come through exercise more than drugs.
I wonder if he's using collagen.
Well, it'll all help to an extent, but I would have thought at this point that's probably going to be healed. What won't heal with drugs is the density that you need that you're going to get through load bearing.
Yeah.
So tendon integrity is going to increase through exercise and load bearing, but that needs to be a gradual acclimatization to weight. So you start high reps light, and then you slowly bring the weight up and the reps down over an extended period of time. That I've always found to be the best approach when rehabbing something of this nature. What I've found is for most people, the actual recovery, the repair, is quite quick. What isn't is that repair becoming strong. And also your mental ability to then train that body part, because there's scarring, there's tightness, and you get lots of phantom pains and lots of little tweaks and niggles, and it can take a long time to build up the confidence to then start to push that muscle again. So I would be more focused on the physical rehab at this point than looking at a stack of a load of drugs, though they're not going to do any harm, that's for sure. But I would suspect that most of you are going to be, most of his actual repair element of his injury is going to be taken care of by this point.
Brandon is correct. He says, True Nutrition, hydrolyzed beef collagen, code THINK. I use it every day in my morning coffee. That's a quote by Scott at least 20 times over the lifespan of this podcast. It's true. I have a commercial for it too. You know what? When I tore my supraspinatus, which is what led me to start using collagen, it was Dante that suggested. He was like, hey, this will help you. I also started doing physical therapy for it. And I learned that with the shoulder, the thing that I missed, and the thing that I think a lot of people have missed, is it's not just strengthening the muscle itself that you need to use, but the supporting structures that go along with it. So like all the physical therapy stuff, I took that. There's a guy called Smashworks, Smash WERX on YouTube. Go to his YouTube page, type in shoulder and look at everything. He's got 100 different mobility exercises there. Spend a good couple of weeks going through all those, try all of them, see what fits for you. I found 5. And then I started incorporating those on my push-pull legs, with my shoulder work. I used that as my shoulder work. And there's some good exercises in there that I still do to this day to support the structures that are all through here to be able to do that overhead movement. So that's my take.
That was a particularly bad masturbation accident you had, though, when you tore that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. Completely. I didn't expect that, Dave. But I guess when you get older,
Well, you get more vigorous when you start trying to pleasure yourself at that level, and obviously accidents happen. It's one of those things.
We had one more. Oh, we went a little long here, Dave. We have one more.
We did.
So this is one I wanted to answer for this guy. because I forgot to do it yesterday. He said when carb cycling for fat loss and you only have one high day, how do you work out how many carbs you need? My weight is 185 pounds at 11% body fat. I wanted to answer this on It's Just Bodybuilding and I forgot. Okay, so there's that, first of all.
So why are we getting the hand downs?
It's because I forgot it. Okay.
Yeah, but it's a hand down. It's not for our show. It's for that one.
No, it was in the group. He was asking the Facebook group for Think Big. And he did it anonymously. You didn't have to make that an anonymous question. You know, there's no reason to hide your identity for that. But anyway, here's my thought is first of all, people can generally, this is what I found, people can generally diet a lot longer than they think before they need their first high day. So I would work on getting depleted first. Get as absolutely depleted as you can. Depleted means this, that you're going to look flat. You're going to feel small. The scale's going to stop moving, probably. You know, you're going to definitely be hungry, starving. And you might even get to a point where the hunger starts fading a little bit. And like I said, your strength will be down. Maybe even your mood is kind of dropped. These things all tell us, these are signs that tell me that you are getting depleted. And then from there, we are going to try a very conservative addition of carbs, and then we're going to watch what happens. So let's say this guy's he doesn't say how many carbs he's eating, but let's say he's eating, we'll say 100 carbs right now. I might add in an additional 50 carbs and we'll call that a high day. And then we'll take your weight the next day, and then we'll see what happens. And we'll see, does it make any effect? Did your scale go up? Did it go down? You know, and just because it goes up, that might mean that you just have more glycogen. You filled back out a little bit. But then what happens over the next several days? Does your hunger pick up? Do you start burning faster? Does the scale start dropping? That would be my thought on how to do that. I just wanted to get that out there.
I think he's looking more at a carb rotation plan where
that's how I would start it though.
Right. So yeah, but then how often would you do the refeed?
As often as you need it. And initially that's what I'm saying is you don't need it. Like you don't need it for a long time. You don't need to rotate for a long time. Start out on a standard diet, let the scale keep going down and down and down. And then eventually it turns into a carb cycle. I don't just arbitrarily start a carb cycle like, hey, we're going to, reduce carbs on these 2 days and then go up. I let it form naturally based off of when your body needs the load. And over time it takes shape. That's the way I would do it.
I wouldn't call that carb cycle. I'd call that refeeding.
That's still a carb cycle, though, especially if it requires having it like every fifth day or something like that.
Well, yeah, but so when I've looked at carb cycling, what I've looked at is set low day, medium day, high day, medium day, low day. That sort of set frequency.
I think it's arbitrary, though, personally, because I used to do that. But anymore, I will try to just work on getting somebody depleted, get right into it, and then eventually, though, it takes shape, and then the structure of that low day, high day, it ends up taking shape based off of when your body actually needed it versus just arbitrarily saying like, okay, now you're going to eat a low day, now you're going to eat a high day.
Well, if I was going to construct a carb cycle based just on someone who wanted a 7-day window of so many lows, so many highs, so many medians or whatever, I would work out what my carb intake would be on my regular day if I was looking to lose weight. So
when you say regular, that's probably going to be like a training day, right?
Well, yeah, but so say for argument's sake, if I was doing a straight diet, I want to be in X amount of deficit. So to create that deficit, I'm running at, let's pick 100 grams of carbs a day.
Okay.
So for me, that's 700 grams total for the week. So then I'd go, right, a low day is, say, 30 grams of carbs. A medium day, I'd put slightly under that. So let's say a medium day is 80 grams of carbs, and then a high day is 150 grams of carbs. And then I would work out, so basically if my medium and low days are this, I've got 700 grams total in the week to play with. So that's going to denote what my high day is if I put a high day in. However, I would also schedule it so that the high day would only come after I'd had several days of low, where I knew they were going to be very depleted and need a boost. But that's how I would preempt it if I was trying to create a block of days that was predetermined what it was doing. I understand completely what you're saying, don't disagree with any of it, but I just got the impression from the question that what he was looking to try and design was a structured set of low and high days in a week, and how would he accommodate how much to use for the high day. I would account what my total grams would be if I was in deficit anyway, take away what I'd done in my previous day, and my high day would make sure I didn't break that ceiling limit of the total grammage over the week, over those 7 days. Did that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good job of explaining that.
I feel like I've just evolved it personally over time because I feel like I can, like, how you have to know, he would already have to, in order for that to work effectively or as effective as it could, he would already have to be in a position where he knew what X amount of carbs was, how his body was going to respond. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's like, well, you're getting mediums and lows and highs, but what's really happening here versus if I can get somebody to deplete, we just try to get the structure working in a way that they'll lose fat and then use the high day once they need it, and then watch them deplete again and then use the high day as they need it. So I agree, it is more of a load, but I also see the load as being part of the, like, that's how the load is part of a high day. There's that. And the other thing I would say is another option is that I usually try to go lower carbs on a non-training day. And that in itself is a cycle. You've already got, let's say you take 2 days off a week, you reduce, say they could get 150 carbs and you bring that down to 75 on non-training days. Boom, there's a carb cycle too, you know?
I think one of the points of this is you've sort of got to pick a weight of carbs and see how you react and judge it from there a bit as well. Yeah. I don't think there's any real sort of major predetermined levels here. I know some people that refeed on a 50% increase on their baseline carbs. I know some people that refeed on 200% increase on their baseline carbs because of how they react. So there is a lot of variation in that as well.
And that will change too as they go. You know what I mean?
As you get leaner and smaller and everything else,
Yeah. So Uncle Dave's advice, you wrote something down today.
I did write something down, and I'm going to say 2 phrases.
Okay.
And strangely enough, after I wrote this, I saw something on IG that I will explain afterwards. Right. So the first phrase I wrote down was, God, I've got this work to do.
Okay.
The second phrase I wrote down was, thank God I have this work to do.
Oh. Thank God you get to do this podcast with Scott, right?
It's all about perception, though. You know, it's like you view something, you view a task negatively, it's going to be a hard task, it's going to be difficult to do.
Yeah.
You view a task as something that's enriching, that's a positive move forward for you in whatever it may be. You earn more money, you know what I mean? It gets the job done would be the base level of what the positivity of that test would be. And you view it from a different way. It makes it much, much easier to do. And then I saw a little thing on IG, and it was a audio clip. Very, very jarbled pictures, no real discernible words. Then they played an audio clip that said a phrase. And then they played the first audio clip again, and you actually heard the phrase that was said in the second audio clip. Not crystal clear, but you could make it out.
Okay.
The difference is perception. So it's the same audio clip you heard in the first instance, but now you've been given a preconceived idea of what that audio clip says.
Yeah.
So your brain now makes it fit. And that's
I've heard
true.
Those things.
That's true of everything we do. If you go into something expecting it to be crap, then most of the time it will be. Yeah. If you go into something expecting it to be bad or to be arduous or to be difficult, then most of the time it will be. If you go into something with an open heart, open mind, and try it, and I know it's difficult, and I know there's certain things that are difficult to put a positive spin on, whatever it is, like doing taxes is never great fun.
Oh, God.
But if you approach these things with an element of positivity, they are much easier to do. And I'm very guilty of this myself. I look at my workload some days and go, shit, hell, I want to get through all this. I've got so much to do. Today was one of those days. And yet, actually, got on with it, got my head down, and the phone has not stopped today. And normally I get very stressed on those days because I just can't get into any work.
Yeah.
And actually, I've done all right. I mean, I've still got another 2-3 hours to go, but actually, it's not been bad. I've got a lot more done than I thought I would get done, and I am going to get everything done that I needed to do, and I've dealt with a dozen extra things that I didn't expect to crop up.
Yeah.
So going into something positively and having the right mindset will massively improve the task at hand. Not always easy to do, and sometimes very difficult to do, but try and focus on the benefits of what you're doing, even if it's just, you know what, it gives me a wage and I can use that wage to XYZ with.
Yep.
Even if that's the only positive you're getting out of it, at least it's something to encourage you to move forward with.
I can agree with all of that. Have you been meditating? You sound like you've been meditating again.
No, but I'm always very reflective. I'm always very analytical of what I do. I analyze what I do. I think through my reactions to things and like, how could I handle that better? What did I do that made that worse than it needed to be?
Yeah.
And I get particularly frustrated sometimes with customers. And it's not their fault. It's just that I'm busy and then I'm having to explain things that I've already explained to them, but it's in writing.
Yes.
You know, but at the end of the day, that ability to talk to our customers is part of what makes us who we are, and that's part of why we're different. So really, it's something I should be embracing, the fact that I've even got the customers to speak to in the first place, because the fact that I've got so many customers is because we're doing something good. We're doing well.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes difficult. I get that. I'm absolutely dying for a piss, by the way.
All right, guys. Well, in that case, we got to go. Thank you for tuning in. Dave, your hand is feeling better?
It's still very sore and weak, but I don't have the swelling and I'm not needing painkillers for every day, but I still can't do things with it.
Okay. Well, guys, check out our future content. Like I said, if you haven't subscribed, then please do. And like, share, all of that stuff. Go to Strom Sports Nutrition if you're in the UK. Go to Eval Blood Analysis to get your lab work done by Dave. TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK for additional savings. And SupplementSource.ca for Canadians. Thank you to everybody from Patreon, guys, for another episode of the podcast with Dave Crosland. We will see you soon.
We dance, right?